For God and his purpose, he rises more in this area, but after a while he felt that the salary was playing, he was getting it, it was never enough compared to the risks that he was exposed to, and Los Angeles at that time were either very wealthy or poor. And tired of Tanaka, almost a little, it happened as a compromise, and Brother Hun lived in the tank. Since he was the DEA control and carried out arrests on contraband dealers and the like, he was exposed to large sums of cash, or in the department sums that were confiscated from smugglers. The first contraband is what? They arrest a person, and he gets money as well, as the amounts were enough to entice Darnell, and he used to talk between him and himself, my brother, I have a small salary, and my uncle walked to me at the end of the month. Where is the problem? During this period, he and his colleagues described that he was sincere and serious with work. He is a self-confident human being, bold and kind to everyone, and at the same time loves to live the style of the wealthy. They collected all the specifications for him and put it down with this person, and actually, for this reason, Darnell also descended on the ethics of the profession, and they started stealing the money they confiscated, and his justification was for himself that this is just an additional income, and like compensation for the dangerous job that he entered into, and he used to tell me, I am here for the sake of society, and he put my life at stake, and with the fatigue of my work, and what is the salary enough? Where is the problem? Stolen. Who is the money in her chest? But the misfortune is that the thefts were getting bigger and bigger. $1,000, $2,000. 15. No one paid attention to this thing at all, so in 1983 he decided that he should not be pleased with you for a unit in the department. He must be in the limit of what they help, first to the extent that he expands the field with thefts, and secondly to the limit he added to agents working in the same department, named Brian Hardford and Ed Williams. These were also corrupt officers, and the role of Neil was aware of this thing, so first of all they had a hint about the subject and saw that it was a group that they liked. The idea that they steal from the money they confiscated, so when he met with them in an office and with realization, counter-narcotics directly, they told him, we are with UNMO just heck. They told him that instead of selling money, why don't we steal from the cocaine and heroin that are confiscated? Who founded a distribution network and who let them sell it? Darnell. Hun was enchanted with this idea. He liked the fact that they sold contraband. He would make them much more profit than the money they confiscated from gangs and merchants. Indeed, they are using a malicious tactic until no one reveals to them in the section the contraband that they confiscated from the sellers. They would bring her to the department, but before they hand it over to the contraband storage warehouse, they were bringing her to Darnell's office, and there they take about 34 Ls. They packed it with bags in it. Fate, behold, to the extent that they gain a large amount of inspiration, they return a quarter to the contraband storage warehouse. Some might say that what is this? Stupidity. Well, certainly, officials will reveal the misconduct that is happening. Where will 3/4 go? Sound words, but the young men were mixing with the quarter that they were handing them to them the sound of bread. The substance is a fine white powder like cocaine. Their external appearance is almost the same, so the movement is impossible to suspect that the bag has a small amount of boys inside and a large amount of baking soda. Although yes, I have any test that will detect traces of cocaine in both cases, and they would not have known what happened, but the work of a chemical test, and actually the operation was effective as well. And no, one of the customers noticed this thing that never happened, and 2 years after Darnell and his assistants and Bahai started the operations, they estimated that they committed dozens of operations to steal drugs, and they got more than $300,000 from them, meaning almost with the calculation of inflation. Today they make $1 million. In addition to this method, Darnell used the Ministry of Interior's known investigations that were happening, for example, chlor, and he is his fellow suspected contraband dealers, and they knew the places where they hid the contraband, like inside a car, inside the house, or by burying it in a certain place. So before they were arrested, he used to go and steal the contraband as if Nothing had happened. The plan is simple. You have my actions very much of course. The thing that encouraged him to work like this is firstly his high confidence. And secondly, there is no one who can report him or know what he is doing. I mean, for sure he will not be an agent, obviously an uncle watching a second agent. As for the method that he used to dispose of contraband, it was through drug dealers who were arrested by Darnell assistants and Ibrahim before. Imagine, for example, in the spirit of Darnell, about a dealer who was arrested before, and when he gives safety, he trusts the second party, buys any contraband from him, of course, in the sense of requests for what I want. The easiest thing for him is to get the contraband dealers because he basically works with them all the time. For example, he used to deal with smuggling networks that operate on the black market in Los Angeles and sell all the quantities that he has, and of course as a DEA agent, they will not mind, and on the contrary, this movement will give them safety and advantages. For example, they will become and know from it if they are a DEA surveillance or they recognize them or not. The distribution network that Dorney worked with the assistants and Brian Witt was competing with the largest gang in the city because the way they worked was very secret, who could be exposed by back around. And of course with the passage of time they began to be given money at $1 million, so of course it is necessary to happen and a way to limit the money in the bank so that they can spend it smoothly than cash exchange. The same time the situation is safe, but they had a problem because you put money in huge amounts in the bank, so it drew the attention of the state to you, and you must have a legitimate source of income that proves that you got the money from it. But Darnell did not have a legal business. The profits mean what he collected were from illegal activities, selling contraband, and in this case he put the money in the bank. And they reported to the federal authorities, and this thing was ruining his work. So it was necessary to get an alternative place to say goodbye to her, and the money laundering process was done, and he hired a close friend of God, and she works as a legal secretary, and her name is Wendy Bedford, and Wendy was tasked with helping him launder the money he collects. So they used a very smart technique to launder money. They used to go to banks and financial institutions and buy checks worth $9,900 from them when they buy the check and give money to the bank in exchange for it. He buys the check $9,900 and gives them the money at the same time. The checks are used to facilitate the process of buying a car or property, for example, or to facilitate payment between the two parties. So Darnell took advantage of this point and started buying checks with all the money that follows with him, and without anyone doubting them. Is there some who will wonder between him and himself that how did he buy checks with all the millions that he has and without anyone doubting him, and why the value of the shape one plays buys it $9,900? Why is it $10,000? The reason is that U.S. law requires banks to report any cash transaction exceeding $10,000. Transaction is registered with the authorities automatically, and it will have to be audited, but under this amount it will not be in any audit, and basically what was bought from the first time with all the money either in companies, but he bought them in installments of 10-10, and the movement that he used is called the dismantling process. But the washing process did not end for the hour it was necessary to get away. He acted in these complaints, and we do not go to the banks again and tell them, and so fully the most important will complain about them directly. Especially since he was an officer and known to the regulatory authorities, he decided that he would travel to a safe place and spend it, which is the Mukhtar of Switzerland, and actually in 1983 they traveled three, Darnell, O'Brien and Pete. The city of Zurich. Of course, some Swiss bank accounts were known for the confidentiality of banking information in them, and in this case, after he puts his business in Switzerland, he returns and sends it again to his accounts in America, and Heck Bacon completed the washing process successfully, and from the first time, to a traveler, and the three were taking with them 10 checks worth $99,000, so they spent them entirely. He returned to Los Angeles a second time. In 1985 they asked the DEA to transfer Darnell from the Los Angeles department to a Detroit department. The reason was that they noticed that he was constantly complaining about the job, and complaining about the pioneers who deducted salaries is trivial, of course. Why? Because the brother now gets 30 salaries. He no longer fills his eye. Although if it were not for the job, he would not be able to continue stealing, which are prohibited from the agency, and sell them abroad. This news of transportation descended on him like a thunderbolt. The distance between the two cities can be more than 3,600 kilometers. Each city in the state means in this case he will not be able to manage his new business, which is his theft selling contraband. He was satisfied and refused to pay attention to it, and even filed a lawsuit for discrimination against the Drug Enforcement Agency. The invitation is intended when the administration they pressure him and threaten him to transfer him to undesirable. And indeed after a while he won the invitation and returned to his work in the same location in Los Angeles, but the movement is not played with the officials, so they started spinning on any job they catch it and accuse it so that they can transfer. He became responsible, and remember that in the 10th month of 1984, several months ago. Who are the events? Vanish into thin air. 1 kilogram of yuan from the warehouse of storing contraband by proxy. So the agents interrogated the person in charge of the warehouse, and even they did not know where this talk disappeared. And you see, the price of a kilo of heroin was not small means at the time. It ranged between $50,000 and $100,000, according to Madre's article before any officer entered the warehouse who wrote his name and signed it. What basket are you? And the references and documents knew that it was more than income controls for the warehouse, and one of them was Darnell. Of course, this kilo is a scream, and from the inside, what was he doing? Once in a while, when he was handing over miscellaneous, he would take some things from the inside without anyone paying attention to him, on the grounds that it was impossible to detect. So the officials opened an internal investigation and asked for a lie detector test. Some of the suspected officers, but more than one, refused to do this test, and of course one of them was Darnell, because he knew that he was going to fail, and the officials underestimated that they were not doing this test as a matter of force. They had the laws to make sure who Ellie was. But until they are sure who might have stolen coin, they became obligatory, and all the people who went to them went to the office and interrogated them. And among them was Darnell, of course, but I don't know they caught anything on him, so they left the office, which is when he saw the agreement. He was confident. Greedy became more controlled, and he thought it was the DD. In the 11th month of 1985, Ollie investigated the file of a contraband dealer. This was one of the largest dealers in Los Angeles. After a long surveillance of one of the houses where contraband was hidden, Darnell decided, he's joining this house. Brian White. Course Hun will be informed, and it is important with permission, and officials know they are in the department will go with their cars, clothes and weapons, meaning a complete break-in. But the clip is that he will take everything that he gets to them, and really, by God, they paralyzed their condition and went home, and after they monitored the situation and prepared, they stormed the place. The three inside, no one was there, but they got more than 180 kilos of cocaine in front of them. The huge quantity, brothers, the 180 kilos. At that time their price was nothing but $18 million, a fabulous amount that Darnell and the guys made sure that it was the salvation of the record-breaking operations, and this was one of the largest hideouts in Los Angeles. It's 3 colleges. When my uncle carried out the break-in, they didn't have it, not journalists who blinded the event, but in someone who filmed, and the DEA were like Tarshan in particular. They didn't know the thing at all, so the young people roamed bags and carried all this quantity with them and took it without feeling a limit on them. And then the role of Han after is the huge operation and the huge quantity, the distribution network that they have expanded further to the extent that they spend the quantities and collect money and send it in the same way that we talked about, trying to these companies leisurely, and then cash the checks in Switzerland. But a few months later, in 1986, the thing became enough to ruin all this thing that they did. The Patrol was an uncle police investigating the file of 2 distributors of contraband. Distributors, these work together and distribute to people in the streets, and they were part of the network that Darren works with. When they watched them, the police, they estimated that they would eliminate them and interrogate them. During the investigation, they asked them about the source that provides them with contraband. I tell them that he is the supplier. He is a man who works in Docky, that is, his name is O'Brien Hardfoot Hahn. When they searched for the name of this man, they knew that he was really the portal of the Drug Enforcement Administration, so they handed this file over to the officials in my country, and when they gathered information about him, they knew that he was one of the close people Williams and Darnell Garcia as Nellie they were trying. They spent most of their time outside the working hours with each other, so they started an intensive monitoring process on them in the hope that they would get any monitored evidence about them. But the observers must be careful because they are not monitoring customers. That is, they have experience that can be more than and certainly always taking precautions during surveillance. You know, the 3 who used to meet each other most of the time in our house. His house was close to his work and he lived there with his wife. He was married and had a 12-year-old son. But then they discovered that this was not his only home. They learned he was buying a house or mansion in one of California's most prestigious areas. My residence in the palace was his friend, who she was. Wendy Bedford, you mentioned to her, who we told him helped him in the process of bilateral money laundering. Hadwilla, their relationship developed with time and they lived with each other. They were surprised by the officials. DEA does Dub get $40,000 to $50,000 a year? The palaces, this is what they have to choose, at least about $500,000 at that time. So where is it all are the funds? Hahn argued in front of everyone that he had inherited after the death of one of his relatives, bought the palace with a down payment, and the rest was borrowed from an Italian businessman, which is the point. You remember her, because we will return to her in 2 dimensions. Of course no one can catch him and nothing at this time. They were mediating calls and all the time, and they knew from the call log that he was calling a number repeatedly in New York City. Los Angeles contacted the NYPD, asked them to know the owner of this number, and discovered that it was a news item working for the Drug Enforcement Administration, meaning a man inside the drug world, but whose job provides them with information about smuggling operations and criminal activities that he is involved in. His name is Howard Kalani. When they met with the agents and asked him what is between you and Darnell, he told them what this person never knew and tried to read himself from the subject. But when Cotto searched, they got a clerk on the phone book Darnell's number and his name. Of course, this was proof that he was communicating with him, and they gave him the Alden band and told him that they would not record him and cooperate with them. He told them that yes, he deals with Darnell, and every once in a while they ship a large number of parcels to his house, which are parcels inside like an eye, but before he ships them they put them inside the cartons on the basis that they are clothes, books for example, or such things. And of course, no one will ever resemble cartons. After he finds out, he sells it. They kick me with his knowledge of the network he is in, and then he transfers profits. From the second time in California, the process was simple but very high, and when they traced the address of the senders of these packages, they knew it was sent from Darnell and his partners in Los Angeles. After they obtained sufficient evidence about them, the process of arrest and interrogation began, and they estimated that on December 22, 1988, they arrested Brian Hardfoot Wade Williams. At the same time, my uncle was preparing to storm Darnell Mansion, but when they knocked on the door, Wendy Bedford came to them, and when they asked her about Darnell, she told them that she did not know where he was. And when they entered, what they got inside, and it was clear to them that he had disappeared, so the only way he could know that he would be arrested was because he had received the news from the inside. And to this point, a second friend of God was working in a Los Angeles court. When agents reached her and asked her about him, I told them that when I saw the arrest warrant. When I saw the arrest warrant for his friend Darnell, I warned him in good faith, and what Chibi sure took, and you don't currently know anything about him. This is just what happened between them, and then they let the agents go. They were most frustrated because of this woman. The accused disappeared from their hands. The situation went astray. Darnell has no news about him. They issued more than 26 charges against him with possession of contraband, conspiracy, selling contraband, tax violation, meaning they did not have anything in mind, but they worked in it and published his name, his picture everywhere, hoping that he was recognized, and they asked for the help of the people to find him, despite their rival. The person's words that he saw him, but he is surrounded, and the place and what they got as a profit is the period the customers were trying to know the place where he hid the money he gets from selling contraband, and they did not search his securities. They knew that he took a loan from an Italian businessman to pay for the palace he bought, like what we told earlier, but when they went to the businessman had and asked him about the loan, he told them, "No, darling, loan. Shoo. I do not know this salami, nor did I give him a loan in my life," which they discovered inside and ringed was forged. This loan to the extent that it covers the source of illegal funds. I mean, when the palace bought the payment of the amount of money that he obtained from the contraband. But how will he give them any money? He forged them this loan and gave them and it was clear to them. After extensive investigation of his bank accounts, they reached the main source from which he obtained money, and the Swiss bank account was transferring money from him to his accounts in America. Imagine that only one from the remittance authority was for $120,000 when he arrived and got the information. My father asked the Swiss government to deliver them. Darnell's accounts are with them, but it was too late because Darnell had his account in Switzerland, and he was calculating this account before. Imagining you guys what they remember, this man calculated it from everywhere, but after delving deeper into his financial accounts, they knew that he was our lover. He had a bank account. Luxembourg is a country in Western Europe. The country is between Germany and France. It is a small country, but do not be tempted by its smallness, because it is an economic giant, and what Darnell account was opened in it about the tampering of Hahn in the 6th month in 1989. My father asked for Interpol's help to arrest him, and he is actually there, and the case was handed over to an investigator named Pierre Conan. This is the same one that we were following on Spacetoon, but it is only salvation. Here went to the bank. Following Darnell had opened an account in it, but I did not inquire about a topic that was late because Darnell was also intoxicating. This account is what they asked the bank manager about. Narrate. Correct. This person remembers the last time they came to the bank and withdrew 3 million euros, and because of the huge amount, he still remembers the transaction. Hey, can some people ask themselves, comes 1 million euros? What was in danger of being investigated or held legally accountable? The answer is no, because at that time Switzerland and Luxembourg were known for their strictness in protecting the privacy of bank accounts and the control procedures, which means that the subject was less transparent than today. And the human being Darnell took advantage of these points. What is important when he was degrading money? The bank manager was semi-suspicious of him, until he did not act any sudden behavior. Darnell said, "Would you come with me outside? I wanted to show you my car," and the bank manager, "I didn't take anything in anything," and he went with him, and they thought of Jeep, Ferrari, Porsche, a car with a value. But when they went out and our house rode the bicycle, and the bank manager went to Hahn, became okay, and it was the last time Darnell got it. Honey, you can ask him like me. It's 3 million euros. How much is the capacity of a bicycle? But I found out that if they were in the 500 euro category, their weight would be less than 7 kilograms, and as a size it could be connected to a backpack. Knowing that this point is very important to most of you, but in some investigators, certainly this question will come to their minds. The important thing is that when Darnell was walking by bike, the bank manager saw the rental sticker on it, and he rented it from a hotel, so when he arrived because the information and knew the name of the hotel, he went to him and asked the employees who followed him and directly recognized him and told him that he is a regular customer with them and he moves continuously from Paris to Luxembourg. But he left a while ago, and they never healed. Here, they had a plan which was to distribute his picture everywhere they could in Luxembourg, especially travel agencies to tourist companies, because at that time, there were no digital means. Not until the person entered and booked he was the airline ticket. He went to travel agencies while they booked the ticket, and they distributed his picture by preparing the places on the basis that it was possible to go and book for him a ticket to someone who moves to another country. And the strange thing is that their plan succeeded, and Darnell made the biggest mistake of their lives on March 7, 1989. He went to a travel agency to get his money back from that plane he booked before coming back. He was planning to move to Paris, and then he changed his mind. God bless the College of Eli Hakina Baikaf, which is the point. Neil's turn is enough for the agency to get back the $200 that the etiquette has reserved. Imagine a man who pulled $1 million a while ago who put himself at risk to the point of getting $200 mtrash, and the employee abuser. The first thing I saw, directly I recognized him, and without doubt, I entered the second section and called the police and told them that it was the person named Darnell Garcia. What is required internationally is for them is to deliver the news directly to be the investigator, and as soon as possible, they went and his assistant until they arrested. Distribution of my clients fought drugs. Their job is to collect evidence of agents. The Drug Enforcement Administration, their job, collect evidence of smuggling networks, or disguise under false identities, and enter between gangs and contraband dealers, and many other tasks. But what can happen if an agent turns to a trader on his level is a disaster. Who is he? This guy. The cause of the biggest scandal in the history of America and the work of a drug distribution network, and carried out raids on homes and seized crazy quantities and got $1 million, and then turned into the most dangerous wanted by America, and Interpol met with 3 countries to arrest him. High story. The latest one is never expected, and in the end it will become a radical change more than once, so I advise you to watch the video for the other. The 80s period was one of the most difficult periods for the Drug Enforcement Administration in America, because it was the most period in which contraband spread everywhere in the country, and other than that it always became battles between them and the contraband dealers. In this period, smuggling operations were mainly concentrated. The East Coast of America, especially Florida, in the DEA was putting great pressure on smugglers and trying to prevent smuggling, which is why the drug cartels changed their strategy and moved all their activities to the West Coast and used Mexico as the main transit point to bring cocaine into California. Of course, this new smuggling line was very safe for them, but it was the saboteur of the world in America. Contraband was everywhere. Crime and violence were increasing dramatically, so the religious DEA was weakened. Sweet, it is the club of the Drug Enforcement Administration. They had to act, so they started a renewal process, and the dealers of contraband were arrested, and they were exporting their goods and confiscating the money they obtained as well, and they imagined that it was the right of the officials to my father. That is, in their lives they did not see the amount of cash money. I said she was the one they saw in the 80s, and the thing they didn't know was that the money they were getting, it would be enough to entice some of them at all times. One of the officers who were working in California. The new contraband smuggling line is a guy named Darnell, the tourist neighbor, who is the focus of our story today. Darnell was born and raised New York, and when he grew up serving in the army for 3 years during the Vietnam War. The period high loved him with national duty, and he was determined to complete his life by serving the country, so when he was discharged from the army, he moved to the foundations of Angeles to study at the university and build a new life in this strict period obsession with sports, and Ellie is martial arts, and he is a champion and competes in championships in this field even, and it was known that he is a player with great abilities, and he won more than one title, and it is even said that he appeared in several films, including a film by Bruce Lee in 1973. But although he was talking about stardom at that period, he had an ambition to work in a completely different field, which is security work, until it reaches this goal. He joined the local police in the 11th month of 1977, and from the first period it was clear to him that he was a man dedicated to his work and blinded him as required, so he immediately caught the attention of the Drug Enforcement Administration and in 1978 joined them in Los Angeles and became an officer in the DEA. She was very important him, and when they arrived, his assistant entered the second section of the travel agency to the extent of being surrounded, and Conan entered through the door and threatened him that he would surrender himself and what he was trying to escape. Han Darnell was surprised and didn't understand how after all this disguise they could reach him. When he saw Conan, he tried to escape from the second section, but in front of the second man he pointed his gun at him. I don't know some people. And they arrested him. Finally, after 7 months of constant escape strike that, they deliver him. He was later imprisoned in Luxembourg. But the story is trivial. Took another turn. After his arrest, he was in trouble regarding an extradition treaty from Luxembourg to America. The reason first is that what happened in the extradition of criminals to America for a very long time in the law was almost an hour, which means that they do not sleep in our house until they are handed over to America. They can imprison him for only 30 days according to the law, but the charges have been proven against him. He will literally be released and he will be free for the rest of his life as long as he is out, but he returned to America. Farah. They eat without salt. Meanwhile, officials in America and Luxembourg communicated with them, and America presented them with 26 charges that they obtained against him, including smuggling, contraband, money laundering and tax evasion. The problem is what America faced. It was what was happening. My money was laundering it from selling contraband. They must have conclusive evidence, and at least it is the money. And the second problem is that the detention period of the month was going to end. I mean, they were in trouble when he was imprisoned. His wife went to him and started visiting him in prison. And she didn't just come to his friend, and I have a house that also told us that she lived with him in the story. His wife comes in the morning and she comes in the afternoon. He is trying to take advantage of these visits. He was watching his wife and girlfriend around the clock at the sign of delivering the money, that is the 3 million that we told about her withdrawal from the bank. We were thinking that it was mostly for 2 women who loved and ran after him, and they only took his money from him, but after several days of surveillance, he did not discover anything, so no one of them would enter any bank and do nothing, so no one watched them, and we tried. For example, he follows his paper trail before his arrest, and he knew after an intensive search that he was opening an account in a bank, deposited in it, and returned 3 million euros, but under the pseudonym Mo, under his real name, and they discovered that he was forging a passport, and they used them all the time, and then they learned that a day after his arrest and his wife left and withdrew the money from the bank because he was her agent as an agency. They asked for the help of all banks in Luxembourg as they were looking for an account that was opened or closed during the period when our house was detained. Of course the process was very difficult, including the word button. But then they learned that his wife, his friend, deposited 1 million euros in the bank, but using different fake names. Shafin the currency screw. Oh, people entered things. Some of them go when they got to the fact that Interpol got the mother and got the money and confronted his wife, his friend in it, and they confessed, and they were arrested and presented it. Interpol as a light guide, she and the forged passport that he used to use until he was sent to America and tried. And indeed this is what happened. They took him to America. And on 15 ISIS 1991, his trial began. Welcome to the first. We will return to the partners who were working with him and Brian Hardford Wade Williams duo. When they were arrested, they gave all the information in their hands about Darnell to the officials in exchange for reducing their sentence, and indeed Brian Hartford was sentenced to 10 years in prison and Williams 5 years and sentenced his wife 4 years in prison because she helped him, and his girlfriend 3 years because she also helped him, and for the axis of injuries Darnell was sentenced to 80 years in prison and paid a fine of $1.61 million, and his sentence was spent for about 21 years, and he was released in the 11th month of 2011 when he got out of prison. He laughed in return about his story and gave a veil that he was subjected to pressure and harsh conditions in his work, which are the reasons that made him happy. The job is undoubtedly very carried out operations he disguises, but the error is always an equal end. The story of this man is one of the worst stories of betrayals in the history of the DD. Any DEA agent has become a drug dealer, and at the level and regarding the second amounts that he got from these operations, other than the $3 million that they confiscated, they did not reach anything, including customers, and mostly the line of 1 million of them, because as we talked about one operation, he and his partners got more than $1 million, and this way we have reached the end of our story. You like it? Do not forget to like and subscribe.